Welcome back to the Island RPG tutorial series. In this episode we're going to add automatic text boxes and in-game buttons, because our project is clearly ready to become a little smarter now, and to make sure these systems stay clean and manageable, we will build everything with a state machine. So this episode is all about adding more interaction without turning the code into chaos. Let's get started. Okay, let's make the dialog box with auto-advancing text and buttons for making in-game choices. But fair warning, this one's going to be the most challenging part so far. So buckle up and let's dive into the next section. I'm just going to quickly increase the damage the player takes so we can see what we're trying to build a bit faster. Here we can see the final placeholder that still needs replacing. It's located directly inside the player scene. We can go ahead and delete the old placeholder and start adding the necessary new nodes. First, let's create a panel and a label, just like we've done before. Then we add a VBox container, making sure it's a child of the panel. Inside the VBox container, we add an HBox container and place two buttons inside it. Make sure to keep the node structure clean and correct, just like shown here. As usual, let's position the panel where we want it and adjust its size to fit nicely into our layout. Now we'll create a new theme. Sure, we could just load the one we made earlier and reuse it for this text box. But I'd like to show you how to work with multiple themes. It's a useful skill when designing more complex UIs. So let's create a brand new theme. We'll start by customizing the panel and the label, as before. But this time, we'll also define styles for the buttons. Make sure to save this theme in the same folder as the previous one, but under a different name, so you can tell them apart. Now we can apply a background to our panel. You might want to try something different here. And if so, you've got some alternative designs available to choose from. And don't forget to set the texture margins. These are crucial when working with scalable textures like frames or dialog boxes. They define which part of the image stays fixed and which part is allowed to stretch, so your box corners don't get distorted when resizing. Alright, let's now set up the alignment and layout for each of the nodes to make sure everything looks clean and structured. Follow these steps as shown. Next up, we'll define the font for our label again. This time I'm going with a slightly smaller font than before, but hey, you know where to get your fonts by now, so feel free to pick your own favorite. Let's do a quick test to see how it looks in the box. We'll center the text alignment. Adjust the box size a little, just to make it fit nicely. Then we'll delete the text in the label, since we'll be adding it dynamically via script later. And yep, time to create that script. Just click this little button here while selecting the panel and save the script in the right folder, like always. Alright, time for some code. We're going to build a little state machine so we can switch between different states with button presses. Just follow along with me as we go. Alright, first up, we'll need a few variables. The first one will hold the stack of our text segments, basically the bits of dialogue we want to show. The second one will define our text speed. You'll be able to tweak this later to make the dialogue scroll faster or slower, whatever feels right for your game. And then we'll set up our 4 states. The first 3 will handle dialogue progression, how the text is displayed, and how players can speed it up or skip. And the 4th one is for triggering the game load when the player presses a button. Simple, right? Let's get coding. The last variable here keeps track of which state we're currently in. You'll see later how everything connects and flows together. Now, in the ready function, we'll first define which boxes should be visible at the start. Then we're calling 2 functions. We'll code those in a bit, don't worry. But the names already give you a pretty good idea of what they'll do. After that, we're jumping straight into the process function. This is where we'll describe what each state should actually do, step by step. The juicy details are coming up next, so stick with me. Before we jump into coding the actual states, we need to set up a few key functions first. Let's start with change state and queueText. The queueText function will handle our chunks of dialogue, stacking them up to display one after another, and the change state function. That one lets us switch between different states when needed, nice and clean. Now we'll also need one more function. This one will handle displaying the actual text on screen. We'll call this one later from the ready state. Speaking of which, let's head over to the ready state and set it up to check if there's any text in the queue. If there is, we'll trigger that text display function we just talked about. Simple as that. And we're ready to roll. Alright, let's move into the show text function. First we need to check if the ghost has appeared, and we'll do that using a global variable that gets triggered when the player dies. But hold up, I just noticed a little leftover issue from our old Textbox version. Let's quickly fix that before moving on. Now that it's sorted, we can set our global variable like this to check it later inside our function. So now that we've checked it, we'll reset it immediately, just to keep things clean. Next up, we grab the current line from our text queue, switch over to the reading state, and make all the necessary UI boxes visible. And now, the magic begins. We're going to use the visible ratio property. This controls how much of the text inside the label is shown, and we're starting with 0.0, meaning nothing's visible yet. Then we'll tween that value up gradually to 1.0, making the text reveal itself letter by letter. Smooth and stylish. Time to code that tween. This little trick is what gives our dialogue that sweet typewriter effect, and you're gonna love how clean it looks. This final value here tells the tween how long it should take to display the entire text, and right now it's set to 5 seconds. But there's a catch. If we leave it like this, short texts will appear painfully slow, and long texts will zoom by in a flash. Why? Because everything would take 5 seconds, no matter the length. So let's fix that. We're going to calculate the duration dynamically, based on the number of characters in the text. And to do that, we'll use the line of code you see right here. Nice and clean. That way short messages show up fast, and longer ones get the time they deserve. Alright. Here we're just making sure that after the tween finishes, the state automatically switches. The function we're calling here still needs to be created, but no worries, it's super self-explanatory and doesn't need much explanation. Now we jump into the reading state. This is where the text is actively being displayed, and if it's taking too long for your taste, you can press a button to instantly show the full text. We're also killing the tween here, just in case it's still running. And of course, after that, we switch over to the finished state. And now we get to the finished state. This is where, after the text has fully appeared, the program decides whether to show the next line or move on to the load state. If there's still more text in the queue, it will just keep going. But if the queue is empty, the program automatically switches to the load state. The switch doesn't happen instantly though. You can still take your time to read before continuing. Super simple, and honestly I think this setup is both clean and kind of brilliant. Let's keep going. In the load state, we first hide the text label. This makes the displayed text disappear, and then we make our VBox container, the one holding the buttons, visible. That's it. No magic tricks needed. Now, as you've probably noticed, we're getting a few red error bars in the script. Let's take a closer look. First up, the tween. Of course. We forgot to define the tween as a variable. Easy fix, nothing to worry about. And those two functions that are still causing trouble, looks like we also forgot to define what exactly gets called back. Again, simple oversight. We'll fix that in a second. Yeah, this probably should have been one of the first things I mentioned. Oops, sorry for that. This is where we feed our dialogue into the system, and it's played back one section at a time. You can stack up as many chunks of text as you want here. Seriously, go wild. The only real limit is the size of your text box, so if you plan to show longer lines of dialogue, all you have to do is stretch the panel a bit to make room. That's it. Simple, flexible, and ready to tell your story. And here's a tip before we continue. If you ever run into problems and aren't sure what's going wrong in your code, don't panic. You can use modern LLMs, those fancy AI assistants like ChatGPT, to help you out. They're super handy for debugging, explaining errors, and even giving tips on how to improve your code. Trust me, it makes the whole dev process way easier. And as you just saw, our test came to a screeching halt because of a tiny leftover mistake. Right there on line 35, we've still got a piece of our old placeholder hanging around. Whoops. Let's fix that by replacing it with our new panel. That's the one we actually want to use now. Once that's sorted, we should be back on track. Et voila! The good news is, the text is showing exactly as planned. The not so good news? Well, just look at all these little bugs crawling around. How many can you spot? And no, I'm not just talking about our little guy wildly swinging his sword even though he's very much dead. So yeah, before we tackle the button logic, let's squash a few of these gremlins first. Debugging time. So, the biggest issue here is that I wasn't able to speed up the text with a button press. Let me take a quick look at the code. Feel free to check it with me, or maybe you've already spotted the problem. Who finds the bug first? Ah, this must be it. I shouldn't reset this variable here, since this function needs to be called multiple times. The reset should only happen here once we switch to the load state. Next up, the infamous sword flailing bug. Let's check the player script. Aha! We've got a leftover piece from the old save system. Totally unnecessary now, so let's delete it. One part is in the main menu, and the other one is in our newly created Textbox script. Inside the attack function, we'll just add a simple condition using an existing variable to say, only attack if the player is alive. That should stop the ghost swinging madness. Now about the spirit not animating. Yeah, turns out it just wasn't told to start. The animation is already set up. We just forgot to hit play. Easy fix. And one last thing. Our panel was hiding behind the trees again. Let's bump up the z-index right here to make sure it renders on top. Alright, that should be everything. Let's run a quick test and see if it all works now. Oh man, what is going on here? This crawling after death definitely shouldn't be happening. This one's a classic, a typical move and slide issue. Yeah, I need to fix that real quick too, but don't worry, I already know exactly what's causing it. Our motto still stands strong, one bug at a time. Alright, So in our physics process, we're calling the good old move and slide function. But of course, that should only run if the player is still alive, obviously. And now, it's time for the hopefully final check. Text appears, we can speed it up with a button press, and at the end we jump right to the buttons. Nice! Now we just need to design and program those buttons. Let's go! Alright, let's start by centering the buttons inside the panel, and let's give them some names while we're at it. Of course, we'll go with load and quit. Once that's done, we'll apply the same font we used for the text label, right in the theme settings. Since our panel is pretty wide, we're going to make good use of that space. To make the buttons stretch and fill the available space, we need to tweak their size flags directly in the button settings. Honestly, I don't find these settings super intuitive, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. Another very important setting, separation in the box containers. This defines the spacing between elements, whether it's buttons or labels, inside your layout. Super useful, especially when you're stacking multiple elements. And of course, the usual suspects when it comes to visuals, the different button states. But this time, we're taking a simpler route. We'll use a style box flat and just assign different colors for each state. Easy, clean, and it gets the job done. Make sure to assign a style box empty to the states disabled, hover and normal. Now choose the two colors for the focused and pressed states. I'm sticking to the colors I used for the panel background and going with a pretty high transparency. That way you can still see a bit of the background shining through the buttons. Looks pretty neat, right? Seems like we need to adjust the button position again. Let's center them one more time, just like we did before. Next, we'll set the corner radius for the buttons. Down here you'll see a little preview of how they'll look, but honestly, I prefer checking it directly in the game to get a better feel for the overall look. Alright, let's see what we've got now. I like the size of the buttons, and the corner radius looks decent too, but I'm not totally happy with the colors yet. We definitely need a bit more transparency. Selecting and pressing already works great. What's still missing though is the grab focus command. Now let's add a nice visual effect. We can use a border with a blend effect. This lets us blend between two colors and gives our button a bit more shape and depth. Feel free to get creative here. Mix up the colors or even go full transparent if that fits your style. You can also play around with different border widths for some unique looks. Looks way better already. Try experimenting with your own settings and find what works best for you. Okay, let's not forget to call grab focus. So our first button is selected by default. I'll add a bit more transparency to mine while we're at it. Of course, you could keep tweaking and perfecting this, but I think we've covered the essentials. Now we just need to make the buttons actually do something. First, let's hook up the signals. I'm using the button up signal this time. This adds a slight delay and triggers the function only when the button is released. The easy part, the quit function. And honestly, the load game function is just as simple. We can copy paste it straight from our main menu script. Alright, let's run one final test and hope that nothing breaks this time. Fingers crossed. And with that, our project has become a lot more interactive. We added automatic text boxes, built in-game buttons, and connected everything through a state machine to keep the logic clean and flexible. So this episode was not just about adding new features, it was also about building them in a smarter way. In the next episode, we will keep expanding the project and push the systems even further. So if you want to continue the journey, I will see you in episode 9. And as always, if you have questions, ideas, or things you would like to see later in the series, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.